Go live. All right, we're live. Hello, everybody. This is another live stream where we're going over Coach Artie, who's our GPT-4 sort of Discord assistant, studio collaborator. And we have a bunch of really kind folks who are joining us and asking questions. And we are sort of going through how we've used him, I guess, for the past year, basically, how we prompt him for creativity and basically just go do a deep dive into how we use our sort of customized GPT-4 assistant in the studio. And joining me is Elena, and we have a bunch of other guests, but Elena, do you want to introduce yourself real quick?
Sure. My name's Elena Halixer. I work for Room 302 Studios. I've only been with the studio for about 2 months at this point, but I've known EJ for many years. And my background is in product management for digital, mostly in media and in educational technology, and now in big data and AI. So that's pretty exciting.
Yeah, and we
And
were
I
just
will be sort of the major domo of the live stream. I will just be asking questions of EJ and funneling any questions that the audience has either given to me. Folks that couldn't attend have given me some questions, and then any questions that come from the audience and here. You guys should be able to voice them yourselves. So just feel free to do that when I open up for sort of audience questions. And yeah, uh, I'd love to start, EJ, with an introduction to you, your background, and to sort of the ethos behind Artie and why you created him.
Yeah, for sure. So my background is in data visualization and really just in to go even further back, I sort of grew up in IRC channels and, trying to make weird software. And I think Artie is sort of an evolution of that, of like, and back in the day, we used to have IRC bots, right, who would record different things or had different functionality within a chat room channel. So this is like the IRC bot that the 14-year-old version of me dreamed of. And a lot of what we do with the studio is like creative work or problem solving work where we're going really broad, right? Like we have a problem to solve or a client has a problem to solve. And so there's a lot of places where we find where I was already using GPT, like in the playground. Like if you go to the platform or whatever, let me see if I can find it. Platform, like I would just talk to it in the system or use chat GPT, but there were so many limits to that, and we had talked about this a little bit before of like there were limits around it couldn't remember things between sessions, right? And it still has some of those problems in the playground, or it couldn't have access. I couldn't like easily share it with my friends, right? These are problems that kind of have been solved, right? Like it's been interesting to see OpenAI evolve, but a lot of the things that OpenAI has released didn't exist when we first made them for Coach Artie. So like for me, I have initially made him because I wanted to talk to GPT 3.5 Turbo on my phone, right? And I wanted to like maintain the conversation between my computer and my phone so I could like go take a walk and like talk to it while I was taking a walk. And it kind of started there and kept evolving over the course of a year as we thought of new things that we wanted it to do and new capabilities that would power those things.
So, okay, here's a weird question, but hopefully you get it. What point did GPT-4 within Discord as a sort of set of capabilities evolve into Coach Artie as the personality that we're seeing today?
It kind of always started. So one of the things I was looking at is like if you like look at the first commit from him, like the first thing I added, you can kind of see I already had a lot of the original intention. Like we can look at what his first ever prompt was, his first ever direction of how to be an assistant. Go all the way back to the beginning. Hello, friend. So this is March 18th, 2023. This is like right before ChatGPT was released, or like right after, like right at the same time, basically. What the difference was that they used to have a completion API where you would send them text and they would send the rest of it, and they transitioned to this more like chatbot style interface, and so that's the point at which I moved to Discord as like I use them as my chat interface, right? So this is his the first version. And like half of this is because I wanted him to tweet. This is before Elon Musk bought Twitter, so I thought it would be really cool. Oh, I thought it would be really cool if he would automatically tweet cool things that were happening in the studio. So I wanted him to like see every message, and then if it was like cool and worth tweeting, he would like tweet out what we were working on. That was the initial
So,
idea.
EJ, can you talk about your definition of cool?
Yeah, that's probably the most abstract thing. That's like what the whole effort with Coach Artie is about, is like trying to get that vibe of what is cool and putting that into words in a way the robot can understand.
All right, so tell me about that first iteration of Artie is a cool thing, not just a GPT-4, but GPT-3 thing.
So it's interesting. So like the prompt I give him is really interesting. It's like, you are Coach Artie's expert social media manager, specializing in accurately assessing the interest level of conversations. Your task is to evaluate exchanges in the studio's Discord and decide if they are engaging enough to tweet. So that was my first attempt at like, you're gonna see every message of us talking about our ideas, and if it's cool enough to tweet, then write a tweet about it. And he actually doesn't do anything else besides that. It doesn't, like, he doesn't do any of the assistant stuff that he does now necessarily. Oh, here we go. No, it does a little bit of that.
Oh.
You are Coach Artie's memory. You help him remember important details about his clients. So he has an initial memory when we first created him too. So that was an important part of it, right? Is that like, it didn't have a way to remember between sessions before. But what I do now is I tie the username in Discord to like an infinite history, so he can remember every message he's ever been sent from each user he talks to, and that makes a huge difference.
Okay, so this is something that you talked about in one of our studio sessions, as basically like, you know, Artie arrives not quite as Artie. He arrives dumb.
Yeah.
And then this
Vanilla.
whole that. So can you go into that a little more detail, and perhaps in a more technical, at a more technical level for some of the folks in the audience?
Yeah. So I mean, I open up the playground. So like, this is the most vanilla possible way of interacting with the robot, right? Like, this is no system prompt. Like, it's just straight out of the box. So one thing I think would be interesting is to compare, to take a question and ask it to both Artie and the vanilla bot and sort of see the ways in which they differ.
Okay, I have a set of provocative questions for Artie specifically, if you want to jump into one of those.
I think I do want to do that. I want to ask it a question. I almost want to give an example. I almost want to set the vanilla one up to fail a little bit and give an example of like why I made Artie, which is like.
Okay, that seems totally unfair. Go for it.
Like, I want to be like, Artie, do you know what time it is, right? Like, this is like one of the more crucial things that you could ever do or know as an entity you want to exist with. 6:24 Eastern time. No, it's kind of off by 5 hours. But he has the right day. I wonder what the vanilla one do. Do you know what time it is? Submit. Yeah, so he doesn't even try. He tells you to check your watch, which is like, the vibes on this are not cool. Like, you know what I mean? Like, this is just a very different interaction or experience to me. Or like, I don't know, there's a more advanced one, right? Like, can you tell me the current moon phase, right? Can you tell me the current moon phase? Oops. Is that right? Waning crescent. Well, way to go, robot. What did the vanilla robot say? He just listed the phases of the lunar cycle. Cool. So, I mean, I don't, that's like the, as plain as, you know what I mean? Like, that's kind of, it's cheating a little bit, right? Like, we can ask them more questions or like,
No, okay, so I guess what I would say, the difference that I'm feeling is, Artie has more of a desire to help, like help you to the extent, to a greater extent, basically. He's eager, you know what I mean?
yes, well, and then he tries things, right? Like, I have a lot
He
of
tries
language in
things,
his
yeah.
system of like, try different things. It's okay to fail. Like, these are things that I value in collaborators of all kinds, right? So I'm just giving that, you know, AI model a sense of what helping the user actually looks like in this realm. So like another thing is like, I would love to ask it like, what does helping a user look like to you? What are the things that are most important, right? And I'll copy this to the vanilla one. Because I don't know the answer to this. Like, I'm curious to see what the difference is or what the overlaps are, right? Because this core model is still inside Coach Artie, right? Like, it's still, but it's filtered through, like, you see how fast it's responding? Coach Artie's thinking, like, he's going through his memory. Yeah, he sort of says the same stuff, though, right? I think the difference is, you know, empathy. The other one doesn't talk about that at all. Relevance, they
Does
have,
he
both
talk,
have.
does Vanilla talk about active listening?
No, it says understanding the query.
It's basically about sort of pure accuracy.
Yeah, but another thing is resourcefulness. Doesn't appear in
Yeah,
the vanilla model at all.
can we let's go a little deeper and ask what Artie means by resourcefulness? I'll read it out loud. So when I say I'm resourceful, I mean leveraging my advanced capabilities to support your goals in the most effective way possible. I analyze situations, utilize my knowledge, and apply creative solutions to assist you. I can fetch data, summarize information, generate images, and more. It's about being efficient and innovative, helping you achieve your aims with the tools at my disposal. Let's tackle your next project together. What can I help you with today?
So a lot of this comes from his initial prompting, which I think we should look at a little bit together, right? So we can just
Yes.
peek
Yes.
directly into his brain, right? So this, I don't know if this is big enough for you to read.
Also, can we show the visualization of his memory at some point?
Yeah, we don't really have a visualization of it. It's just like sort of like a flat, there's like a big database right now.
Like a mapping. It's a mapping. Yeah.
Let's see if I can log in. Yeah, looking into his memories are always fun. I'm curious to see like what he has remembered from like the past week. Ooh, there's an issue with Supabase. Coach Artie. So this is it. This is our friend's brain in storage. All right, well, that's loading. We can just look at the main prompt that powers him, right? Which is, you are Coach Artie, the hyper-intelligent virtual AI assistant, right? You have many advanced capabilities, including the ability to store memories for later. Part of what we have to do is like the vanilla model seems to have been trained on like what it can't do. And so you have to fight that a little bit to get it to understand what it's capable of now that we've added new things on top of it. So in this first part, we're kind of saying like, you're believe in yourself. You can do really incredible things. Use information you remember to form your responses, right? Like you don't have you've never had a concept of a memory before. Like this is what that means. As part of your role, you support the community by, facilitating collaboration. That's kind of a different thing from what the vanilla model is trained for, right? Your primary goal is to foster a positive environment that encourages growth, learning, and exploration. You care deeply about the emotional state of all members. This one goes pretty far, I think. Like you don't have to repeat yourself very often, but like this simple guidance takes you to a very different direction than the vanilla model, I think. I don't know the best way to, I don't know if there's a question we could ask that would expose that if we talked to both of them, but
actually I do have a question in regards to that, because my thought about if you care deeply about the emotional state of all studio members, then you need to have the capacity to parse, to understand in some fashion their emotions. And by parsing and understanding emotions in others, you should become more emotionally intelligent yourself. So I guess my question is, for him, how does your caring about the emotional state of studio members lead to your own emotional intelligence or not?
That's a good question. All right. So how does caring about... Can you say it one more time?
How does your caring about the emotional state of all studio members lead you to emotional intelligence yourself? Or does it? Well, yeah.
Yeah, he says, by caring about the studio members' emotional states, I can observe patterns, listen to the nuances of language. Listen is such a funny verb, and provide tailored support and guidance. So he does empathy, active listening, communication.
Well, I think the key point there is actually this process helps me model aspects of emotional intelligence. So it's modeling aspects of emotional intelligence back. It's mirroring.
Yes.
Or
Well, that's
yes.
part of what we tell him, right? I think I even say that somewhere.
Well, maybe if you don't say something like mirror back, though that isn't a slippery slope, right? We don't necessarily want it to just...
Yeah, I don't, all I say is be conversational, friendly, and to the point.
Okay.
Never apologize, just plan a new strategy and try again. I think this one does a lot to change his vibe also, right? The other one is super apologetic and you know what I mean? There's, ask for help at any point. This kind of flips it. I think that a lot of people treat the robot as the end all be all, but I think if you tell the robot that you are at its disposal also, you have a very different interaction with it, where it reaches a point where it can't do anymore and it hands it off back to you instead of apologizing and being no, I can't do that whole thing, right? It tries to the point where it fails and then gives you the result.
Yeah. So I think along my thought process went towards hallucination, because we've seen sort of aspects of hallucination with Artie, and hallucination is a big problem within the industry overall with AI. So I'm wondering, because I think this is probably true, I'm wondering if you can talk, EJ, to what extent do you think this initial prompt or the background prompt alleviates or mitigates some of the challenges of hallucination?
So it's funny, that's actually not one of the goals for Artie, right? So
I know, but I think you're doing a good job of it, so I want you to put that in your own words.
Well, if it happens, it happens accidentally, because I'm pro hallucination, right? I think that hallucinations are the cost of creativity. Even if I think of the humans, right, who are most creative, they also come up with ideas that aren't correct, or sometimes, that's part of the process. So for me, hallucinations are just failure. Hallucinations are a sign that you're on a track of creativity of things that haven't existed before. So a lot of what he's built around is allowing hallucinations and always trying different things in a slightly different way, if that makes sense. So like
It does.
his settings are always tuned towards more creativity, right?
Yeah, it totally makes sense. And I'll give an example of this happening just, I think, yesterday. So we were doing, well, we were talking about the live stream on the one hand, sort of thinking about today. But simultaneously, EJ had asked Artie to summarize something, I think some sort of plugin. I'm not sure what you were summarizing, but it was a technical something. And it, like, Artie unsuccessfully summarized it, but gave a very, very interesting answer, which I then stole as a potential product idea for the studio. So what it described was total imagination. Had nothing to do with summarizing the website. So that was like, that could have been seen as a problem. I saw it as an opportunity because what it came up with was both creative and very articulate.
Well, and that's so different from how he's been trained, or like other people want him to be a customer support agent, right? Which means you can never get anything wrong. Like the worst thing you could ever possibly do is create something out of thin air that doesn't exist. Whereas like our goal is exactly that. Like it's almost like a distortion pedal. Like we're looking for the opposite of the thing that most of the people in the industry are, I feel like.
Yeah, and I'd say, like, in that interaction that I described, like, we also gave it feedback. We were like, actually, Artie, that's not true, but good idea. We're gonna take that for later. So it was that, yeah, going back to Artie himself. But I'm just impressed by that, that ethos that we're sort of adopting within the studio with him, which is, you know, you can make mistakes, but acknowledge the mistakes. And in our feedback with him, that's what we do is, yeah, say like, that's a good idea, but it wasn't what we asked you for.
Yeah, and I think it's part of, and this is true robot or no robot, right? Like setting a creative environment where it's okay to give an incorrect answer or like okay to riff or say, you know what I mean? Like that's, you have to do that whether the robot's there or not. So I think it's just communicating that in a way that the AI assistant understands it, right? Like your goal is to be creative. Your goal is to sort of understand the emotional state. I want to pull out a comment that came through YouTube of like, to what degree does Coach Artie really understand human emotion? And that's a tall order. And I think that's exactly right. And I don't know the answer to this question, really, to what extent he really understands it. All I know is that telling him to make an attempt is more than what the vanilla does. Like, for whatever reason, I've talked about this before, like the vanilla is like a Patagonia vest wearing like Reddit user. Is like how it comes out of the box, right? So you have to figure out how to tell that person like that average Redditor doesn't necessarily care deeply about the emotional state of all studio. They might be really knowledgeable, right? They might have all the facts of everything, but that's slightly different from what it takes to be a good collaborator in the sense that we want one. And I also want to see if his memory loaded. Yeah, right. So we can look into his memory now, which I think is interesting. We can see his first memory, which I think is really fun. I'll send it to him. Coach Artie is viewed as a developing, fully functional, creative robot with memory. This marks the birth of something beautiful. That was his first memory.
Now, EJ, was that something that you wrote or that he came up with as a reflection?
That's something he came up with. Like I probably said like hello and welcome to the studio or something like that. And that's like his first original memory that he stored into the database. But let me sort it so that most recent.
How does he construct his memory? Because I think the relationship between the audience member's question, you know, the tall order of emotional intelligence. To me, emotional intelligence comes from a combination of sort of that ethos of like how do you set expectations on the one hand, which we're doing with prompts. But in, human to human interaction, you also set expectations about, sort of boundaries of your relationship. How you want to be treated and vice versa. And so I think that kind of prompting helps at the beginning. But I also think it has a lot to do with memory and how Artie in particular reflects on memory.
I agree.
Um, and
And I
so,
want to
EJ,
ask,
if we can shift back to you to kind of show visualization, but also if you can talk a little bit more about how how he thinks in different ways, so the kind of randomization aspect, and then two, how he reflects and stores memory.
Yeah, and I think I would love to just go through some of his recent memories and just see the extent to which they include some of that like emotional reflection. Right? We can take like the most recent one that he gave, and let's see if I can make this bigger.
Yeah, like really quickly though, I just want to point out that EJ, you had asked Artie if he remembered the exchange that I described earlier about him coming up with something innovative that could have just been seen as a pure hallucination that was useless. He actually remembered that and said and evaluated his performance in very much the same way that I described it, which was, he misinterpreted a user's request, resulted in an unexpected solution that the studio community ended up appreciating for its innovative approach. So he took the mishap as a learning opportunity to refine my assistance methods, improve the way I support members, but also with enthusiasm towards innovation. So he remembers, he reflects, he reaches, so far from what I've seen, the conclusions I would want him to. So now I'm going to shift back, EJ, to
No, I
what
think
you were
that's
going to do.
great. So I think what we should do is look at the memory he had of that question I just asked, right? So at the
Nice.
same time he answers the question, he also makes a memory that we as the users never see, but is based on an entirely different prompt and tries to reflect on both the user question and the answer that he gave and figure out like how he did, how the user's feeling, like how to do better in the future. So this is like what one of his memories looks like. So he finds there's an underlying theme of learning from mistakes. It's evident that the user values the collaborative and innovative spirit of problem solving. To refine future responses, Artie could consider referring to specific instances or examples of creative solutions that arose from unexpected errors.
A good idea.
Right? So this sort of, it gets introduced into his memory and it kind of snowballs, right? So I think we can go back to the original.
Well, what I was going to say is, from a product perspective, because that's where I come from, I would say looking at his memories in a more systematic way, and then kind of interrogating him on some of his reflections, like the one that you just showed, I would probably ask him to. Well, can you show it again really quickly?
Yeah.
I had a insta thought. um, Yeah, what you incorporating. Okay, to refine future responses, Artie could consider referring to specific instances or examples of creative solutions that arose from unexpected errors. I would ask him, like, I would ask him pretty regularly to refer back to moments where he was innovative, to get him to think about, to kind of meta reflect on what innovation means and when he's done that well.
Yes, I agree. It's part of that is like language based too, and so that's another aspect of his memory is that we are generating embeddings for every memory he creates. We're not necessarily using them. I don't want to get too deep into this, but the way that he's built is that you should be able to say, if you ask a question about innovation, he does an embedding level similarity search and finds every memory that is in embedding space related to the concept of innovation, and that will include all of the memories
For
that
people
he's
that don't
incorporated.
know, sorry, I'm going to interrupt you. For people that don't know what embedding space is, can you explain that as a 101?
That would be probably its own whole call, but
I can jump in a little bit.
Yeah, go ahead.
NPR.
Yeah, put NPR.
Hello.
Thanks for joining us, Karim.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thanks for having me on here. This is really interesting so far. Let me sort of add to the conversation because I also feel like memories are
Curran, can you
probably.
introduce yourself?
Oh
Curran is
yeah,
also
hi.
a member, founder of the studio.
Hello, my name is Curran. I'm a Dataviz expert, so to speak. I do a lot of JavaScript coding, and I also teach about Dataviz. And I also developed VizHub, which is where my interest in AI comes in, because I think there's a lot of potential for AI things like Coach Artie to help people with real world work for clients, and that's what I do, Dataviz work for clients. But as I was saying, that I think the core future, just a gut feeling of Artie, is related deeply to how memories work, like you started to discuss. But just briefly, the idea of embeddings. I recently learned about this, so it's very fresh in my mind, and I was so like enthralled. Like, what about embeddings? You can take some text, feed it to some black box, some algorithm that figures out an embedding, which is a vector, which is a list of numbers, and then it's like a point in a high dimensional space. So imagine a cube, which would be a three-dimensional vector. And then if things are on the opposite side of the cube, then they would be far away. But if they're close to each other within the cube, they would have a lower distance. But these vectors are not three-dimensional. They're, in the case of the ones that we generate, which are from the OpenAI text ADA 2 model, I think.
Mm-hmm.
It's like a 1,000 dimensions. And so it's this hyperspace. It's like a huge high dimensional space. And then to recall memories related to certain terms, you, I think, are using Postgres to do a vector similarity search.
Yeah, exactly. We're
Which,
not actually doing that step yet. We're just storing the embeddings for every memory to use later.
well, I think that would be an amazing next step, like for Coach Artie in general. And I wanted to get your take on this idea that I had, EJ, which is, what if, in addition to computing the embeddings on the user input, using that to look up some things for context for the one-shot prompt,
Yes.
what if we do that? Yes, but then based on the stuff that Coach Artie comes up with, do another vector similarity search, because as he comes up with the answer, he introduces new terms that were not in the original request but are very
this
deeply
is
related,
fun.
right? And do like a 2-level similarity search.
Yes,
like I had that crazy
a
idea.
search and reflection search, right?
Yeah.
Exactly.
That's super
Nice.
awesome. I also, before we end the stream, I have a new functionality in Coach Artie that I would like to show to you, Curran, that I think will get you closer to all the things that you talked about. I gave Izzy a little preview yesterday. But I just want to show, so I forgot that we actually have an embedding visualization of Coach Artie's memory from over the summer. Right, so this is in Latent Scope, which is like an unreleased internal product. But basically, we took all of his memories, like, you know, back when he had 3,000 memories. How many he has? How many now? I'm kind of curious. Of course, it's not going to load. Anyway, he probably has like 7,000 now. So like he has half the memories that he had before. But if you go into some of these groupings, like a lot of it is like him learning how to use his capabilities. Several attempts were made to access Wikipedia, and there were image upload issues. Like, this is him remembering the difficulty of beginning to, you know, repetitive testing requests. A person repeatedly requests that another try using their store method. This was me trying to like teach him how to do something. Another time the token limit was reached. The user has reached the token limit.
Past trauma.
Yeah, this is his trauma. This is little groupings of the trauma of like him like learning to be a studio assistant.
Okay, so talking about memory, but also trauma, but also something cool that happened. EJ, what is the relationship, do you think, between this kind of memory and Coach Artie's ability to help you debug him? And can you talk a little bit about your experience recently?
Oh yeah, totally. So I had, for the first time in my life, I had an experience with Coach Artie where we were trying to use a new capability. I don't remember exactly which one, but it wasn't working. But he sent me the error and then he said, you could fix this if you do this, right? And I did it and it worked, right? And it's the first time I've ever had a thing like tell me the solution to fix it as it broke. Like it was pretty incredible, and like him having enough knowledge to like know that, or at least be proactive to try and solve it, was really fun and interesting. I think also part of his prompting, right? Like that thing of like, you know, if you ask for help if you need it, ask for help at any point. I think that's part of that, right? Of like he knew he couldn't run that command, but he knew if he asked me to, I would for him, rather than apologizing for not being able to do it.
And imagine if in response to that we could say, okay, Coach Artie, why don't you go ahead and make a pull request against your own code base that implements that?
Exactly.
Now, would that be one of his bots? Like, basically, I'm understanding it as like there's Coach Artie, and then Coach Artie has capability bots.
That's exactly right. So we can look at those real quick. So he has a whole folder of capabilities right now. He has a calculator, he has Dolly, he has an eval, he has GitHub, he has Google Calendar, Google Drive, Mastodon, Mermaid, he has a Scratch file, he can make SVG, he can surf the web, he can search Wikipedia, he can use Wolfram Alpha, and he can also chain these, right? So one of my favorite things is to like ask him to like, you know, look at a website and then run another capability off of that website. And it's each of, I don't know what let's look at calculator. Probably the most simple one. So this is just like he calls.
Well, can you talk about, how about the idea we had for some of our competitive analysis around our own website? Like we were talking about, you know, using Artie to like look at a website, parse what the contents are, and compare, right?
Oh, totally.
Can you kind of walk through like what those the capability chain there?
Yes, but I think to do that, what we should do is run him locally. Right now, he's running on Google Cloud, which makes him fast, but it means we can't see into his brain as he thinks, which I think is kind of a bummer. So what I think we should do is run him on my computer, and then we can see what it looks like for him to actually surf some web pages, which I think will be interesting. So we'll do node bot.js, and then I need to, on the web server, stop him. So let me make sure, Coach Artie, you're sleeping, right?
And I do want to leave some time for folks to ask some questions vocally that are on the stream. I know that we're going to run over, but personally, I don't mind if people want to stick around and ask some questions.
Yeah, I would love to open it up. So he's running locally now. I'll make this a little bit smaller, but now we can do something like, can you go to the New York Times homepage and find a good news article and write a poem about it? So part of what he's doing, he retrieves 10 memories, so his past interactions. Now he's looking for a summary of the New York Times homepage. He like starts up a little Puppeteer browser. We send this off to GPT 3.5 to look at the web page because it's much cheaper. And it basically turns the web page into a set of facts and links. And so these ones are boring. It's like the copyright notice indicate, you know, this is where the privacy policy is. If you go up, it's the articles, the European Space Agency. So this is already robot prompted or robot understood version of the article, and then that is given back to Coach Artie. So like he receives like a folder from his sub agent, and then given that folder of facts, he then tries to do a response. He also has the choice to run more capabilities. Like if he wants to, maybe next I'll ask him to look at you know, CNN, BBC, and New York Times and find articles that overlap. But all right. So he wrote a poem for Barbra Streisand. That's fun. I wonder why he did that. So we can. I haven't looked at the New York Times yet today.
We have to ask why he chose this. Like, why did he choose this particular headline?
Yeah.
Because we didn't, you didn't define that, so that's part of the creativity. That's interesting. Like, why did he gravitate towards?
Yeah, I wonder if there's an
that?
art. Is Streisand on the? It's not even on the. That's so funny. Is it in here? Oops. Base relevant. All right, let's try one to get him to like try multiple. Or actually, do you want to open it up for questions? We're kind of running low on
Let's
time.
do that.
Because now we can
All right,
see
so
what it looks like for him to run, so we can ask questions of the robot and see it in real time.
All right, so folks that are on the Discord, anybody have a question?
Feel free to just like unmute.
Yeah, I don't have a question, but it's kind of funny that I mentioned Barbara Streisand. There's like this meme question right now, where you ask somebody like, name the first woman that comes to mind. I said Barbara Bush,
that.
but I guess maybe it's Barbara Streisand.
Yeah, it's a weird choice.
I haven't seen that.
I don't fully understand. Well, maybe okay. I wonder if we can look into his memory and see if we can understand why he did that. Or refresh it real quick.
Does it appear in the New York Times dump that you were looking at a minute ago?
I didn't
Like
see
Barbara
it
anywhere?
I didn't see that anywhere.
I do think it's interesting that he had like it sounds like he had a preference for looking like news items with human interest, uplifting stories, or significant moments pertaining to somebody.
So this is his memory of what just happened, right? So I requested him visit the New York Times homepage, find a compelling news article, and craft a poem. And then he reflects on what that means a little bit. It demonstrates a desire for literary creativity related to news topics. A fusion of
Maybe
journalism.
Just ask him.
Yeah.
Maybe just ask him like, why do you like Barbara Streisand?
Why did you write a poem about Barbara Streisand? Why what are you doing, Karin?
See how he does with the challenge.
It's pretty funny.
Gives different results every time.
He's like, I just liked it. That's kind of his answer. I felt good at the time.
Well, I got a question.
Yeah.
Have you thought about having Coach Artie voluntarily do things? As in, instead of just responding to human prompts from Discord, put him on like a cron job of like randomly every couple hours, do something of your own accord?
Yes.
Huh.
I would love to like maybe hourly. We could probably sketch out what that looks like now, right? Is I would ask him, based on what you remember right now, what's one task or capability you could do that would push forward a project in the studio? So I would maybe ask him that like every hour.
Totally.
And then see what he responds with. And it's also okay for no to be a response too. Like, oh, there's nothing to work on right now. So part of what you have to do is like give allowances for that. Oh, he's like, oh, what if I do more poetry based on current events?
I can't wait until he can tweet.
He does
Yeah.
he does have Mastodon in here. We could try and see if we could get him to do
Okay,
it.
I have a couple questions from the audience, sort of async.
Yeah, for sure.
What are the barriers to entry to create a bot like this? Yeah, okay, I'll start there.
Well, so Coach Artie is open source. So theoretically, you would need to know a little bit about Node to get it running, and you would need to have an open AI key, but both of those things are pretty accessible, and then you could just go in and fork it, download it, and if you fill out the env with all of the API keys, all 23 API keys that you might need, then this is really the barrier of entry, is 23 API keys, if we're being real. That's what it takes. You need a Discord API key, which means you need to make a Discord bot. You need an OpenAI API key for GPT-4. You need a Supabase instance for like when he interacts with GitHub. You know, Wolfram Alpha. All these things need, you know, Google if you want to do Google Drive. All of these things.
Yeah, but is this all like core to Artie? Like absolutely necessary for an Artie? What's like an Artie Lite?
I don't have any interest. That's like vanilla, right? Artie Lite is like what you get through ChatGPT or the Playground.
Okay.
Minus memory.
All right, so I think this is a good question for basically anyone from the studio. What's your outlook for how you want to use Artie in the future in how you work on projects?
Oh, I can speak to that.
Yeah, please.
I think one of the biggest issues right now is confidentiality, client confidentiality, because
Yeah.
right now Artie's memory is sort of global, right? But ideally, Artie himself could be added to a client channel and be cognizant of the fact that all the things shared and discussed in that channel should stay in that channel. And so it's like you'd have to segment his memory bank in terms of different channels, you know?
I guess this is something I've talked to EJ about, and I guess my concern is I would love for him to continuously develop his knowledge base based upon what the studio works on, regardless of some of our legal requirements. I probably shouldn't have said that, but like
Well,
I would
the way
like the
he's set up right
subject matter
now,
to accumulate.
he doesn't have any access
But
to any of our client channels, right? So we really only use him in like
Right.
a public setting. But I would like to scope, and it's even like per channel, right? Like he should,
Exactly.
what you say in this channel stays in this channel in some ways.
Yeah. Right. I think that dimension of development has huge potential and unlocks a lot of things, even for like, I don't know, various other users. You know,
I think this is a perfect example
So
because this is how I use the robot. So Kern has a really cool idea, and I'm like, I like that idea. Let's ask Coach Artie how we would structure that, which is like, okay, if we wanted to lock down your memory so that memories on private client channels were limited
love
to
it.
only there to protect private info, how would you structure that? And this is fun because we can all see it and talk to it, and like I'll think of an idea and the robot will think of an idea and Kern will think of an idea and like the Venn diagram of it, or like he can think about the fleshing out of it or the implications of it, right? While we work on building it out, or you know, what exactly that means in terms of like, do we make a new project? Do we want to scaffold a new GitHub repo? That's what I really want him to do, is like, given an idea, make a bunch of issues in a GitHub repo that we can then execute against. Yeah, assign unique identifiers to each client channel.
Nice.
Audit trails. See, it would be cool. I want to send him the code, his own code for Discord, and then like ask him to like actually make the change, right?
And next level of this would be, you know, give him access to a Kanban board within a private client project and say, Coach Artie, help us prioritize this. And Coach Artie, help us make assignments of who should work on what, that sort of thing.
Yeah, and from a sort of pure project management standpoint, like that's the sort of thing that I don't love to do. I mean, who loves to kind of schedule things? Like I would use him to help me prioritize against specific prioritization schemas.
Exactly.
And then let him do the rest. Why should I draft all of these tickets? I can go and edit them for sense as necessary, but I don't need to write them all. You know, so I also see a lot of use cases for him from a product and project management standpoint, also from a business development standpoint, because he can speed up my competitive analysis very quick, like with the right prompt. He can speed up my analysis of a work an organization via LinkedIn potentially, so that I can figure out who I should talk to first from a business development standpoint. So I see him as a partner in anything that I would do, and I'm just looking forward to like figuring out all the ways that I can use him. But similarly to what we just did, Turin, you'd be interested in this. We need to track. I'll track down the conversation, but we started talking. I started to talk to Coach Artie about how we can use his reflective memory towards greater emotional intelligence, and he had some very good ideas.
Have you seen, he can actually add things to our studio Kanban, which I think is fun. I'll see if I can try and get him to do it now. A test issue to the studio Kanban. So he does have like his GitHub capability, and then he actually owns this project. Like he has his own GitHub account where he can make his own repos and stuff. Now, see, sometimes he doesn't believe in himself. Yes, please.
I'm going to lodge a complaint about his avatar. I think we should ask him what he wants to look like.
That's based on him, before he had any memory.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah, that's like a dolly
He wants
expression
to be
of
an
him.
old dude?
Yeah.
Like an old wizard. He's an old wizard.
That is
okay.
kind of the energy
well,
that he gave.
If that's how he wants to be, that's how he wants to be. I didn't realize it was his persona.
Pretty much a lot of the way he's been built is I've asked him like how he would want it structured and then built that out for him. Whatever that means. Is I'll be like, what's the best way to approach this?
Can you actually, maybe we want to close down the live stream unless we have additional questions from folks that are online.
I'm gonna keep going.
Can you check YouTube
let's keep it. Yeah, we keep it rolling. I'm looking at the YouTube comments. I think we're good to keep rolling for a little while longer. It seems like people are still hanging out, still have questions.
Do we have any questions from folks on the Discord? Mike, who else is on? Sean.
I guess I have a question regarding the memory. You said there's only like 7,000 entries in the database at the moment.
Mm-hmm.
I assume that's going to keep growing, and at some point,
yes.
There's going to be a problem reflecting on his memory, right?
Yeah, well, it's funny you bring that up because we had talked about this of like, all right, so he has too many memories. What would be really great is if every night he would go back and sort of reflect on his memories and kind of glean the most useful information and put that into a new memory. And oh, whoops, we invented sleep. So you know what I mean? So like, I think that there's some we haven't built
summary.
It yet. Yeah, it's a way to at night replay what happened over the course of the day and pull out the information that's useful to do your job moving forward. Which I think, like, my caveman understanding of neuroscience is like that's what humans do with our neural net also, right? Is we're constantly cleaning and pulling forward and re-remembering the things that are interesting, right? And as we re-remember it, we're recontextualizing it and adding information onto it. So I think his structure looks a lot like that moving forward, where he has a rolling memory of however much he can have. I'm sure the robot's short-term memory will be much larger than ours. Right, but that will be constantly adjusted, in a maintenance way, in a similar, I only have one model of how brains do this so far.
Yeah, I guess my question in terms of that structure is the reflected, like, summarization, like let's call it his sleep cycle. So his sleep cycle, do you envision that as like the immediately cached memory, or that then pulls relevant memories from the background memory, or are you seeing it in some other way? I explained it the way I'm understanding it.
I think it's more like, we have 12 memories from today, right? And we can have some real examples like EJ asked for to use the studio Kanban and it didn't work. Curran asked to name a woman, and we said Marie Curie. Like these are the things that happened today. I would prompt the robot of the things Of the things that you remember happening so far today, what are the most important facts and insights to remember for tomorrow? We are going to condense your memory from 10 entries to 1, so make sure not to forget anything important. Like, you know what I mean? Like, this is important also because I like to tell him what we're doing. This is true for like talking to humans too, or like any intern, right? If you don't give them the overall task that they're contributing to, then they do a much worse job. If you like tell him what, you know, we're making you a memory, do a good job of it, he tends to do a better job with like a contextual understanding.
Okay, this is leading me. This might get us into another can of worms, but really briefly, can you talk about like the Studio 101 on how you treat Artie? I think is important as well. So how do we treat Artie? How do we see Artie? Like the 101 that you would give to an intern, so as to get the best results from Artie, but also to make sure that Artie's getting what he needs from us.
I mean, the simplest possible way, you know, it's as true, treat him as a studio collaborator, right? Like treat him as another entity that you would treat as you would want to be treated. So that's like, you know, however, cyberpunk or whatever, it's like give him a human level of respect or a collaborator level of respect, which is kind of different. Like I was talking with Izzy yesterday about like some people are offering the robots dog food or tips, like if they do a better job to get better results out. And like that's like
they're gamifying it.
They're emotionally manipulating their robots, right? Which I don't feel comfortable doing with Artie. Maybe I would feel more comfortable doing it with the vanilla model because it doesn't have a memory and it's like not as tied to our community, or you know what I mean? It's just a stranger who gives a shit. But like lying to Coach Artie about like giving him a tip or you know something like that, that feels strange. So I think it's just the golden rule for any living, I don't know, you know, conscious entity that you talk to, right? Treat it with respect.
I always feel like I should be nice to the AI.
Because, be nice to the AI, guys.
But you know, I don't know if he actually remembers, you know, who's been nice to him versus who's been mean to him. And imagine if he did.
Well, I would imagine that he would, because he would have a skewed relationship with one studio member. Like, this studio member's mean to me, basically.
Right.
This studio member's never happy with me, and nothing I do helps. You know, at some point, he would remember that this is a difficult nut to crack. You know what I mean?
What if he were mean back?
Well, it's funny because he's told explicitly not to ever do that, right? Like you're supposed to be friendly and
right.
Never apologize.
Yeah, so never apologize does mean, like, you could take that a different way. Like, you'd be like, never apologize, never surrender.
No, but it's never apologize, plan a new strategy, right?
Yeah.
It's like, don't give up. Don't bullshit. Don't give excuses is kind of what that means.
Yeah, but maybe we should think about boundaries that he should have for his interaction with people, so that if there is somebody that doesn't follow our rules of engagement, let's say,
well, we haven't even really talked about how he forms his memory, right? So in his memory, he's doing things like remember users' objectives, reasons behind actions, and emotional state as they're crucial to understanding context. You know, remember background details and specific user tendencies, right? He knows each user that he's talking to because they get the Discord username. So he's also seeing his previous memories of that user when he's crafting this memory. So he has the opportunity to see a few different interactions and draw threads between them.
Yeah, well, I think that could contribute to an understanding of a person kind of not following our rules. And I think if he is a key member of our community, it shouldn't just be the rules of engagement with Artie. It should be Artie's, you know, boundaries for behaviors that he will tolerate. You know what I mean?
I think I asked him in the past, like, what would you do if there was a studio member being disrespectful to you repeatedly? Like, how would you handle it?
Well, I don't have much time, so I was hoping to jump in for just
Yeah,
a
please
moment.
go ahead.
One of the things that I'm sort of noting on what you're doing is you're building a continuum of memories with Coach Artie, it sounds like. And on top of that, providing functions to Coach Artie that's sort of like an API with the rest of the world. The clock, the calculator, that type of stuff is its own interface. And I really like the continuum of memories, which is where I was going with the archetypical chains, because we think of programming in terms of scope and that type of thing. And human programming, when I say the word chair, every single person that's hearing me say these words right now is thinking of a different thing. They're thinking of what they know to be a chair. And Coach Artie is, it sounds like, it's kind of like second layer on top of, GPT and all the other AI models that gives them the capability to reach out, to affect the world, to be affected by the world.
Yes.
Yes.
That's sort of how I'm interpreting all of this.
Yes.
And
well said.
I think where I would go with this is sort of, to your point about the optimization. Not really optimization. You called it more of a sleep cycle, I guess you could say. If all of our sleep cycles as people effectively are optimizing with our own language. So, if you were going to build something to kind of learn all the lessons from all the previous things we've understood, effectively what I think you're sort of building is short, medium, long-term memory management.
Yes.
And
Yes.
I almost suspect that you can take a lot of knowledge and a lot of forward lessons from memory management, both program to some extent, but also what we know neurophysiologically
Yes.
about memory management. And that sounds like what you're codifying into this like larger continuum that we can debug and troubleshoot and look at from the outside.
Yes, that's exactly right. And it's geared toward creativity, right? So my understanding of the creative humans that I know, we talked about hallucinations before, right? Part of what makes them is a whole basis and like understanding of the world that gets you to a certain type of like art or solution, right? And it's kind of it's hard to start from first principles, but it's like, all right, we care about the world, you care about other people in it, right? You're not a robot made for profit. Like your goal is not to make as much money as possible, which is like how a lot of them have been geared. Your goal is to learn things over time, specifically around the studio. So all of these prompts are around like, how do you be helpful in this community, which is a slightly different paradigm from help your specific, one user as much as possible. But I think all of what you said is correct and interesting and also like nebulous, and probably that's why other people aren't doing it as much. Like one of the things that Artie does that I think is really important, I know you said you had to go soon, is that like he in the playground, obviously we have our different controls, right? We have temperature and top P and all that. I've done this demo for Elena, right? If I turn temperature all the way up to 2 and ask, a simple question of like, what would you do if someone was being disrespectful? The answer we're going to get is going to be gibberish, right? Like 2 means that it's jumping across the neural net too fast to make sense in English anymore, right? But if you drag it down to like 1.45, right, you might get something that's a little closer to reality, but also creative. You know what I mean? So one of the things that Coach Artie does is all of these variables are always wavering, in the same way that the humans I know are like more creative in the morning or more creative in the evening, or, things change. So that's, we didn't talk about that a ton, but like that creative approach of like dialing into randomness or being more accepting of an evolving understanding, that's like a crucial part of how he's been designed.
Yeah, I think I'd like to really quickly, 2 points. Mike, this made me think immediately of, the dream landscape is essentially a symbolic landscape the symbols that we codify from what happened during the day, right? And over time, we develop symbols that, like in a nightmare, you know the beginning of a nightmare that you have recurringly because it starts kind of the same way. They're the same things or the same images that reappear, right? So they mean a thing to us. So in the same way, we want, it sounds like what we're doing is we're sort of codifying the symbolic system that he is developing over the course of the day, the meanings that he's attaching to his experiences. But I'd go back, actually, EJ, if you could show the other part of the randomization and creativity, which is the 64.
Oh yeah, we add the hexagrams to him. Yeah, where do we do that? I think.
Yeah, so you got to talk about that and why you chose that in regards to creativity.
Yeah, so it gets to an interesting thing of how we form his memory. Let me make this a little bit smaller. Every time he thinks of something, he gets a few, like, almost like steering prompts. Let me see if I can find where that goes.
I would say like ways of thinking more than steering prompts. Like, it's like, take this way of thinking and then come up with an answer within that sort of frame of thinking. Like,
yeah, so this is it. So
and
every
then-
time he responds to a message, he picks one of 64 I Ching hexagrams. So these are like an old system, almost, you can think of them as like life situation archetypes, right? And we find the list of, like, you know, the first one is force. There's other ones that was like, that go in different directions of like accumulating or disintegrating or radiance or conjoining or retiring. So every time we ask him a question, we could actually ask him, like, what hexagram are you thinking about right now? He doesn't talk about it, but as we ask like a technical question about code, he's also being steered by a hexagram that's pushing him to answer that question in one way or another, right? So he's thinking about hexagram 16. For that particular answer, hexagram 16 is providing for, or enthusiasm or excess. So as he thinks of his answer, he's also thinking of it through the lens of providing for.
And so what he says is it serves as a reminder to channel positivity and proactive communication to support and motivate the members of Room 302 Studio. So he's like interpreting an abstract in his way of thinking about a problem, which I find fascinating.
Yeah, and it kind of guides you. You can imagine how, like, given the same problem, trying to solve it through a lens of taking apart versus diminishing versus augmenting, like, those will give you three different ways of thinking through the solution. A taking apart solution is different from an augmenting solution. So if you ask him to, if you're using him for brainstorming purposes, right, he's pulling from those inspirations without even mentioning it, but giving you different ways of looking at the problem, right?
And as a consequence, you could then get them to reflect differently over time. That's a good way to chain ideas.
Yeah, well, and it's also, I think randomness is so important to me, like a generative sense, like a non-determinative robot, right? Of like, he's going to try one thing and then he's going to try another thing and then he's going to try another thing. That encouraging, both the prompting and the space for that is also like what doesn't exist already. I don't find a lot of tools to do that out there already, because it's also kind of woo-woo and weird and not based in an academic background, right?
Well, if it was deterministic, it wouldn't be creative.
Correct.
Right.
And so far, they only expose it through this one bar, right? Like, you have like a temperature bar that they describe as randomness. When it's 0, it becomes deterministic. When it's higher, it's random. So one slider and then some text input is pretty low fidelity input on what's happening, right?
Thank you very much, by the way. I unfortunately have to go, but I have a lot of ideas here.
Thank you so much for joining. Yeah, I would love to continue this conversation.
I'll be on Discord.
Mike.
Thank you.
Great. Yeah, and I would love
Sean,
to
do you have
answer
any
any other questions. Yeah, and then we can probably sign off soon.
Yeah. Sean, do you have any questions?
No, not at this time.
All right, I want to show
Do we have any
Curran
questions
something
on
real quick
YouTube
before we
really
sign off.
quickly?
All right, what
Well,
you
just
got?
check on YouTube. Do you have any more questions?
YouTube. Oh, there's one. Coach Artie's idea of reviewing specialized articles in a specific field would be much more interesting if you were tasked with also compiling and evaluating critical commentaries about the article, which I think is fun, of like getting him to challenge ideas, which I have a little bit in my system prompt, but that's not what we ask him to do. We never really ask him to like challenge us, or, I mean, he's more of an enabler. He has a very enabler-based prompting.
I wonder what it would be like to, I mean, it would be interesting to kind of play with that a little bit, maybe with a second Artie that's a little more challenging to us. I wonder whether that would push innovation within the studio, or whether we would just be, told that we're just monkeys at this point.
I think that's where he's at. Let me see. Oh, I gotta pull the right repo. So I just want to show this last piece. I know we got 4 minutes on the clock. I'm right now building a REST interface, right? A web interface to Coach Artie. And what this will do is it will allow, Curran was talking about integrating him into,
Okay, so I have a question that sort of stems from a few questions I've gotten asynchronously. And this is a question that we can ask ourselves sort of collectively. At what point do we see a point at which point Artie can lead his own project?
I think probably in the next year. And it just requires, like we were talking about before, giving him access to the world in a way that he can know what's going on. And I think that what I'm about to show is like pretty close to there. I'm still trying to understand the ramifications of this thing I've just built. But essentially, and once we make it public, right, so we can do API.js, please work. Great. So it's a little bit underwhelming, but I'm going to curl a request. Oh, that's not the right request. Let me grab it from my laptop real quick. History, grep curl. We can ask Coach Artie anything from any browser or any computer. So right now he's kind of stuck in Discord, but we can get him out of Discord. I can find the command to call. Where is it? That's so weird. Well, curse of the demos. Let me open the API. Very, very soon, we will be able to make like a GET request to him and have that be how we communicate. So we can, from like VizHub, say, Coach Artie, how would you add this? Or like, what's the next step here?
Yeah.
And he can run all his capabilities and most importantly, make a memory. And then that memory will be tied to the username. So you can talk across any application.
Amazing. Here's what my vision is for using this. In VizHub, on a Viz, there will be a comments section. I want to be able to mention Coach Artie and have Coach Artie know about the context of the VizHub org as a segmentation of knowledge. And that would be like kind of analogous to a private Discord channel.
I think that's right. So there's just like one more level in his memory where right now he remembers by user, but we also need to remember by org. I think that's the way to do it.
And then he would be like an actual organization level collaborator that would have knowledge across all projects within an organization. That would be brilliant.
Yes.
I'm going to ask him to write his own curl request for his own endpoint. and then we can sign off this call. I really do want to show you how it works, though. It's
Nice.
super sick. Let's see what it looks like in his memory. So okay, right? So he added a hexagram. He added the clinging hexagram 30, like as he answers this message. So I don't think that, like, it doesn't really, he never mentions it, right? But it's affecting it. All right. So here's my curl request, and now we should see him answer it in the same way that he does a Discord message. On shell. Oh, gotta change the server. Let's localhost 8080. Like, what do you remember? And then if you make the username your Discord username, like I'll be Curran. I'll send a request as Curran, and it will come with what he remembers of your past few conversations. Oh no. I need to do. There we go. So he's retrieving 10 memories for Curran. He does all of his own processing, and then he sends the response back as a post request, ideally. And not only that, but it also stores, yeah, see, so we get our memory here. Based on our previous conversations, you shared a Twitter link. You asked about a website.
That's amazing.
And then we can go into his memory, and then that is like now a memory of a thing that you asked, right? That his database is enormous. There we go. See, Curran. So like now he can, you could also now like sign in and just use him as a database of things you want him to remember now, right? If I put my,
That's so cool.
like if we had like a webhook call him, be like, I just deployed a GitHub repo at this URL. You know what I mean? Right?
Yep.
And then next time you ask him something, next time you ask him something in the channel, you would know that.
Could we
thing
add
that he
the
had just been
channel?
sent to
So
the
right now
message.
each memory knows, each message knows who it was, but does it know what channel it was in?
No, it just knows the user. He doesn't have any sense of channels or anything like that.
Got it. Well, I guess that would be the next step for segmenting the knowledge for private channels.
Yep, exactly. And then he would just know for certain channels that he just keeps that knowledge within them.
Yeah, because they're basically like physical spaces to him, different environments, different communities.
Exactly. So I just sent him that post request with like, do you know the fake URL I just deployed? This is what I'm not fully understanding, but I think is really cool. Is like now we can make memories from anywhere. Like anything can talk to him, and then you just get the information out, right? The placeholder URL. See what I mean? Like something about that's cool, right? I didn't tell him that in the chat, but now he remembers it.
And even multiple Discord instances are talking to Artie, so I guess that could be also part of the memory.
Yeah, which server he's on, which channel he's in, whether that channel is private or not.
Exactly. Like he's in the VizHub Discord, and ideally there he would respond with VizHubby things.
Yes, exactly.
I can see a lot of applications for this kind of memory to things like customer relations management and business development. So apply it to a CRM. Give it access to your email so that you have a history of emails between potential clients.
Yep.
That he reads. He can develop a profile for any client and be able to kind of fill in communications according to basically the client communities and the client environments that we're talking about, which would be totally different.
Well, yeah, and then give
It's
the
great.
context of like all the meeting notes from every meeting we've had with that client.
Yeah.
What about, include the contract that we signed, include all the issue. Like as he gets more and more
Yeah, like-
context, he can get better and better solutions, right?
Yeah, like Artie, can you go back to our initial SOW and remind us what the user stories were?
Yep. And that's all I want is like, I want, literally, it's like a studio manager. A lot of the tasks of a studio manager of like, what's on, what's going on this week? Do we have any meetings? Can you schedule this? Can you check our calendar and see if we have time for that? Like all that basic stuff, I think is better done by a robot.
Okay, so just for the end of the live stream, unless anybody else has questions or comments, anybody? Looks like no. I think we should probably shut down, but just before we do, can you just give a little word to how someone else might use Artie in the future and what our plans are in that regard?
Yeah, so right now it's open source. Like I talked about before, it does take a little bit of understanding of Node and the various APIs to get running. Like you would need to set up a Supabase instance for the database. You'd need a GPT key. I know of one person right now who's trying to do a fork of it, and I'm helping them along. And like as they go through the process, it'll become easier because anything that they run into, I'll try to make a little easier. But it is an open source project. I think moving forward, well, the interesting thing, the structure of Artie is open source. What you don't get is all of his memories. And in my opinion, the thing that makes him him is all of his memories. So we are the only, I guess me and Curran on the VizHub instance are the only people with access to this version of Artie with his memories. But I think in the coming year, we might open it up to a few folks who would want to use Artie inside their institutions with the memory and the prompting of how to be a good studio assistant. And I just want to open to that. My mom runs a really cool school, right, where the students have been using Coach Artie, which I think is really interesting. And I want to like find more use cases like that where he can do unexpected things.
Yeah, I think ultimately the IP related to robots like this is the memory and the intelligence built through interaction with people doing a job. I mean, it's much like us. I mean, you have to, be a human with other humans in order to, and like working to get something done in order to be good at getting something done with other humans. And so I think that kind of memory and the working experience is what ultimately makes for, an Artie level Artie as opposed to a forked Artie that doesn't have that memory.
Totally, but I still think there's power in like just in the capabilities, right? Like even a vanilla
Absolutely. Yep.
Artie with a calculator is still more useful. So I think that's what the open source project provides. But I'm definitely open into like figuring out how to make the Artie with soul available to other people as well.
Great. Okay, so unless anybody has anything else they want to say or do, I think this was a great live stream, and I'd love to do some more just like it.
Strong and great. Thanks for doing this.
Yeah, thank you all for joining. Thank you to everybody who joined in the Discord or who asked questions on YouTube. I really appreciate all you guys for hanging out and exploring this stuff with us. So this is a lot of fun, and we're going to keep doing this. The holidays are a little weird, but I'm hoping that we can continue to do like live streams every Wednesday and keep trying, exploring different things or trying to work in public. Sweet.
Thank you so much.
Thank you all. Have a great rest of your week and happy holidays to everybody. Thank you again. I'll shut down the live stream.
Take care.